Hello, today I am going to teach another poem, Digging by Seamus Heaney. Seamus Heaney was an Irish poet. He was born in 1939. He died in 2013. Seamus Heaney was born at a time when Ireland was dominated by British Crown. In 1609, English planters set their foot on Ireland. They went there for economic reasons, but eventually they start buying the property of Irish people and settle there. This results in a conflict between the native Catholic Irish and the English Protestant planters, which eventually takes the face of two wars. Anglican dominance in Ireland was further ensured by penal law. British people actually passed a law to curtail the socio-political and religious rights of any dissenter. So any Irish man or woman who presented an opinion which didn't go along with the British Crown had to be penalized, had to be punished. So the situation was very bad. There were competition in the market. There were restrictions on buying a land or renting a house. Roman Catholic Irish were not allowed to enter any trade freely, and they had to pay various kinds of taxes. People were dominated by the British Crown, but they were not happy, and there was a revolution. So when Seamus Heaney was growing up, he saw all these things happening around him. He was very much affected by all this. However, he chose to stay aloof. But he could not ignore the situation. He could not ignore his conscience. We see how all these situations and all these things time and again appear in his poetry. For instance, in The Tolund Man, he compares the sacrifice of ancient people with Irish men. In another poem, A Constable Calls, Seamus Heaney shows the fear of the native farmers. Then there is another poem, The Tombed Road, where Seamus Heaney shows the threat of state terrorism. His people were actually terrified by the crown, so much so that they eventually take arm against them. But our poet takes another path. He doesn't take gun. He chooses to write. So in this poem we will see what he is doing. So Digging is published in Seamus Heaney's very first volume of poetry, which was published in 1966. Seamus Heaney was only 26 years old at that time. Digging is a poem about an amateur poet's attempt to find a subject matter for his poetry. This poem can be divided in three sections. We see that an amateur poet sits on his desk to choose a subject. This is the first scene, and in the second scene we see that he is looking out of his window and sees his father. On the third scene or section we see that looking his father makes him recall his grandfather. And by the time he's recalling, he's comparing himself, we see the poem is produced already. This poem is very much like Ted Hughes's Thought Fox. Actually, Seamus Heaney was inspired by Thought Fox or Ted Hughes. In one of his prose collection, he actually says that Ted Hughes's Lupercal inspired him to choose the incidents of his life as the subject matter of his poetry. And As I said, this poem Digging is very much like Ted Hughes' poem Thought Fox. Okay, so now we will study and see what is happening in digging. So we have to focus first on the title. What is the title? The title is Digging. So digging, what is digging? Is an act of trying to find something on earth, right? So poets cannot dig, do they? No. Who digs? A farmer does, or someone who is working in a mine, coal mine for instance, or in a mineral mine, a diamond mine. They dig for things, right? But our amateur poet is digging. He's digging for what? He's digging for his roots. He sits on his desk and wants to write a poem, but he doesn't know what he wants to write about. So he's trying to get to his root. You have to see how digging is also connected with roots. We dig on earth, right? And on earth there are roots, like a tree. Seamus Heaney is almost like the tree who is reaching to his roots. He is going back in past to find his roots, so that he can understand what he wants to write about. So what is happening? As I said, the poet is on a chair or a desk. He wants to write something, and this poet is young, an amateur poet. He is not the poet whom we know as Seamus Heaney, who has won the Nobel Prize in 1993. So this Seamus Heaney is an amateur poet who writes something substantial. But he could not understand what he wants to write about. So he sits there, and then he looks out the window where he sees his father, who is very attentive and who is working very hard. By looking his father, he recalls his grandfather, who was as devoted to his work, as laborious as his father. And he is not just looking and reminiscing his father and grandfather. He is also comparing himself with them. He is saying that unlike them, I have a pen. I don't have a spade or a gun to dig with. I have a pen. They chose their profession to dig, but I chose a pen. But I will dig with it. Okay? So let's see what is happening in the poem. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests, snug as a gun. Under my window, a clean rasp sound. When the spade sinks into gravelly ground, my father digging, I look down. So what is happening? The poet is on his desk, and he sees that there is a pen which is resting quite nicely between his finger and his thumb. He says this pen is very comfortable, but it is not a gun, as comfortable as a gun. So when we hold a gun, when we cannot hold a gun, we are normal citizens, right? So when even we think of holding a gun, it makes us feel uncomfortable, right? Because it is not legal. And gun also means violence. Gun means revolution. Guns mean fight, war. But this pen is snug, comfortable. We cannot feel comfortable if we hold a gun. But holding a pen makes him feel very comfortable. Why? Because he knows what he is doing, and he knows what he is doing is correct, is right, is not bad, is not evil. So he is just thinking of it. So when he starts writing, he's thinking very revolutionary, right? Because he's comparing his pen with a gun. It seems like he's very much inspired by the revolutionaries of his time, and he almost wanted to do something like them. So at the start of the beginning, he's in a mood to war. He's in a mood to rebel against these British planters. But then he looks out of the window and he sees his father, who is very calm and who is very laborious, just going about his work. What is he doing? He is digging. till his training rump among the flower beds bends low, comes up 20 years away, stooping in rhythm through potato drills where he was digging. The coarse boot nestled on the lug, the shaft against the inside knee was levered firmly. He rooted out tall tops, buried the bright edge deep to scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. So now, by looking his father right now at the present, he is recalling his childhood. His father has been doing the same work since long. He used to dig potatoes and Seamus Heaney or the speaker and his siblings used to enjoy and pick up those potatoes between their hands, and they enjoyed the feeling. It made them feel joyous. So there is a joy in creation, right? So as their father dug out the potatoes, these children feel very joyous because they had something which his father planted and grew. So he recalls his childhood and recalls how his father has been working thoroughly all these years. By God, the old man could handle a spade just like he is old man. He's saying, oh my God, my father is so old, but still he could do work as hard as he used to do when he was young, when we were child. So and that is 20 years ago. He's no more a child, he's a young man now. And he says that it is not just my father, my grandfather used to work as hard as him. So both of them are hardworking, laborious, and very devoted to their profession. My grandfather cut more tuft in a day than any other man on Turner's bog. Once I carried him milk in a bottle, corked sloppily with pepper. He strengthened up to drink it, then felt right away, nickling and slicing neatly, heaving swords over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf, digging. So what is he saying? He's saying that not just my father, my grandfather was as good as him. He then recalls this, how he used to carry milk for his grandfather and how his grandfather didn't waste a minute's time to rest. He just drank the milk and then right went back to his work, digging down and down for the good turf. So he is taking inspiration from his father and his grandfather. He feels the enjoyment of creation, of finding something good. His grandfather is inspiring him to go down and down, to go deep, to find his roots. The cold smell of potato mold, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the cuts of an edge, through leaving roots, awaking in my head. So what is happening? As he is seeing his father and recalling his childhood and when he used to enjoy the feeling of potatoes between his hands, and he used to feel so proud of his grandfather who worked laboriously, devotedly. All these memories is helping him to connect with his roots. Seamus Heaney's father and grandfather both are working class people, right? Seamus Heaney was also poor at the beginning of his career. So just like them, he could have taken the same profession, but he did not do that. He chose to be a poet. However, he is trying to find a means to connect with his roots by digging. He is not just digging in earth for his subject matter, he is also digging in his memory. He is going back to his childhood, his past, to find his subject matter, to see what he could produce now. So these memories is actually awakening the roots in his head. That means he knows now what he wants to write about. And only because of that we know that by the time we see how at the beginning of the poem he wanted he wants to compare himself with a soldier. He wanted a gun, but now he regrets that he doesn't have a spade. So just looking at the socio-political scenario, the disruption of the time when he was writing, he wanted to join the rebellious army, join his friends and his natives, and to rebel against the British crown. That is why he's comparing his pen with a snug. But by the time he's writing, he's completing this poem, he knows what he wants to do actually, and he compares his pen not with a gun, not with a weapon, but with a tool. He is going to use his pen as a tool to dig his history, to find his roots, and by doing that he will actually protest against the British crown by letting the world know what was happening in his country, how they were made to suffer, how the colonizers dominated them, and how it was so unjust. So that is why he's saying that the tone, the very tone, that's why he's saying that he found his root. The memories have awakened the roots in his head, and he regrets that he doesn't have a similar tool, but he has a pen, and this pen is sitting quite nicely. He says, between my finger and my thumb the squat pen rests. I will dig with it. I will do the same kind of work which my father and grandfather did with their tool, but I will dig with my pen rather than a spade. So that is what he's saying. And just like Ted Hughes's Thought Fox, in this poem, the poet, just by recalling his past, seeing his father, and then remembering his grandfather, is producing a poem because he has found a root, and this root has produced a poem. I hope I have been able to make this poem easier for you. So thank you.